And we are live. Awesome. All right. Welcome, Ridge Runner Nation. We are back for another Ridge Runner Live episode. We have Cam Rentsch and Alex Jackson on the show this week. Um, what just happened? Um, yeah. As you notice, we're short a little bit. We're missing an individual. Can you guys guess who that is? Oh, wait a minute. It's Wesley. Someone want to talk about where Wesley is right now and why he's not on the show?
He made a friend, so he's a little occupied, so he says. So, yeah, he's not with us.
So I hope he comes back soon. But all right, we can get into some intros here real quick. First off, I think the most important part to talk about is the beer that we're drinking this evening. And I'm over here with some more Java Stout. I've been lazy since last week and have not gone out and got anything else. So I'm finishing up that 6 pack. What do you got over there, Alex?
Same brewery, but Who Cooks for You from Jackie O's.
It's a good choice.
Yeah. And I'm working with a Fist City Chicago Pale Ale from Revolution Brewing Company.
So nice. All right. So Wesley will be back with us here shortly. He is apparently driving to his house, his Hawaii house, so that he can jump in and join us. So everything's going to go wonky when he joins us, but we'll just preempt that. But until then, we can go ahead and get started without him. First off, I guess maybe quick little introductions of who you guys are. And you're part of Ridge Runners Nation, so everyone should know, if you follow Ridge Runners Nation on Strava, you should see all their runs. But Cam, why don't you go first and tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm Cam. I'm a graduate student at the University of Chicago. I have a bachelor's from Ohio State. If you can't tell, I'm used to introducing myself in an academic sense, so had to start there. I'm originally from Tuscarawas County, Ohio. Just moved out to Chicago here in the fall to start working on my master's degree. Obviously, I'm in Ridge Runners. I run ultras, not particularly fast, but I have ran them. So
I am Alex Jackson. I grew up in Solon, up in Northeast Ohio, where I used to bark with those runners up there. And I went to Ohio University, where I unfortunately met Wesley, and things kind of went south from there. Ran some ultras in college, and then I graduated in the spring of 2019, and shortly after moved to Columbus, where I am a fellow working at the Ohio State House. So I now live and work in Columbus, but I've been injured for the last few months. My knee has been kind of weird. We'll call it weird. Haven't been running nearly as much as I would prefer since running Shawnee, 50 miler back in October. So it's been a good 3 months now, but the last couple of weeks I've made some progress and I'm finally getting some miles in again. So that's where I'm at.
It's good. Does it feel good to be running kind of again?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely going to jump more into that topic as we move forward. But first, I kind of want to figure out running and ultra running and why maybe you guys joined or got into the sport. I know you said you met Wesley when you were at OU, and is he the reason that you started to run and long distance, or were you doing that beforehand, or what?
Yeah. So throughout high school, I was running track and cross country, and I kind of it was fun. Like I enjoyed the experience, but the actual racing, like 5Ks and 2 miles on the track, like I didn't really like that very much. It was real competitive, real fast, and I couldn't hang with the big guns. So I was always throughout high school, I knew I wanted to run a marathon. Shortly after graduation. So I signed up for the Columbus Marathon, which was during the fall of my freshman year at OU. So I got a marathon under my belt pretty quickly after high school. But that was kind of it for then. I didn't think I would ever, I wanted to run ultras, but I was like, that's like what, older people who own land end up doing later on in life. So I wasn't like too urgent about it. I didn't think it was realistic for, someone my age or in college or whatever to do that. But then I met Wesley, and the first run with him was when Wesley was running uh, 5 10-mile loops around Stroud's Run, the Harton route. And I was like, okay, so there's this crazy kid who goes to OU who's doing a 50-mile trail run on Saturday. And all of a sudden, I realized maybe I wasn't the craziest one. And seeing someone else who was crazier kind of like showed that it was feasible to do. And yeah, so I definitely credit Wesley with helping me make that jump from marathon to ultras.
Nice. Looks like Wesley finally decided to grace us with some sort of presence. Um, but you've pretty much stuck with ultra running, right? Has that been pretty much your main focus since you started long distance
Yeah,
stuff?
I threw a couple marathons in since kind of just to like see where I was at. I really didn't like it. Like this summer, I decided to run or it was in May, I ran the Cleveland Rite Aid Marathon. Decided relatively late to kind of test my fitness, and it was a hot day, and I kind of bonked at the end, and was not fun. Was off my PR from a couple years earlier, uh, and don't know if I'll ever do one. I'm sure I will, but I tell myself I don't think I'll do one ever again,
Hmm.
at least not in the near future.
Cam, what about you? What got you into this long distance activity?
Yeah. Um, so I've like ran for a large portion of my life, but never seriously until probably about 3 years ago. Like the football team would run like sidelines and 300s. And I once was a part of a 4x1 that the throwers on the track team ran with a pizza box. So I guess you could say I started preparing as early as Alex with that, like, 7 to 8 years of cross country and track and field that he did. Uh, but yeah, so I first sort of heard about trail running when I saw the Barkley Marathons documentary on Netflix. This was my freshman year of college. Um, and I remember seeing it. It's the one that was on Netflix. It's not anymore. And thinking like, wow, that kind of looks like the part of Ohio that I'm from, where they're having this race at. And I was like, I wonder what it would do, like what it would take, or what it would feel like to do a race like that. And then I pretty much forgot about it like right away. And I still like, I tried to keep fit. I would go to the gym. I would run occasionally. But then when my sophomore year rolled around, I started working too. Uh, and I just sort of fell out of everything that I was doing for fitness. And to put it the way Alex likes to, I was a washed up linebacker who was drinking too much beer and smoking too much pot. And I felt like I was getting pretty fat, to be honest. Uh, and I wanted to do something to kind of get back in shape, but I had zero desire to lift weights anymore. I had done that for a long time, and it was giving nothing to me. There's no way to like get hyped up about doing like 4 sets of 10 deadlifts when there's like no, you know, stupid football game that's going to come up on Friday night. So I signed up for a road half marathon in Columbus. It was the Broke Man's Half Marathon. Um, those are on like January 6th. But they're also like $20 and it's what like I could afford. And then I took one of those like free Hal Higdon plans off the internet and I started training. And then I ran this race. And somewhere like along the way, running stopped being this thing that I did for exercise. And I started doing it because I liked it. It sort of like went from, like fitness to hobby. Um, and then I sort of like put two and two together that you can run in the woods like those people in that weird documentary I saw a long time ago. And I had always been sort of like outdoorsy. I had sort of like grown up. I was out in the woods a lot. And I was like, these are two things that I really like now. Why don't I put them together? And then I started trail running, and ultra running is just sort of like a pretty natural progression from doing like any sort of length of trail run. You do like any sort of Google search for trail running, I'm sure like a Billy Yang or a Ginger Runner video is going to come up, and I like fell way down the rabbit hole with all of that kind of stuff. And now 3 years later, here I am. I run ultras. So
It's great. The Hal Hedgen plans are great too. I think many people use those as their, especially as a starting spot. Like that's what I did. I know when I did my
it's like,
first half, it was or first full. Like I was using those as a guideline because I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't have any clue what I'm doing. I'm just kind of winging it. But
yeah. I mean, if we're on the training plan recommendation portion of the show, I've been such a huge fan of the book Training for the Uphill Athlete. Steve House, Scott Johnson, and Killian Jornet sort of all co-authored this book together. It's from Patagonia Books, and so like worst case scenario, right? It's like all recycled stuff, so it's not that bad to go buy a new thing, and it's got great pictures in it. But there's also like a lot of really heavy duty science in it, and a lot of really applicable stuff that I think sort of everyone can put to their training. So,
hi Wesley.
What's going on, Return Nation?
Have a good
My
day.
apologies.
Ah,
Things are a little different out here in Hawaii. There's
your,
no time zones.
your backlight's a little bright.
mhm.
You're almost silhouetted.
He's on island time, guys.
Yeah, check out the behind me here.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. You know, you can just go home.
Yeah.
I see it behind me.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, you guys can check out these very blank walls of my apartment.
Yeah,
I promise I do have decorations. They're just not here.
good stuff. So how are you guys doing? So you guys doing a little chat
Yeah,
already?
We're not throwing as much as you are.
We did our beer introductions. I don't know if you've got any adult beverages with you over there.
I'll run and grab one. I was drinking a Kona Brewing Company. I think it's the Gold Cliff IPA. It's like the best beer I've ever had.
It wasn't a Bud Light.
No, it's an IPA, 7.2%.
Wow.
It's super light though, and
Wizard.
yeah, it's big time for me. It's a big change, but it was super good. So I've been drinking it every day here so far.
Nice.
I'm not sure Wesley's going to make it back to the mainland. At this point.
Yeah, it's like a 2% chance.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. It was like 4 degrees this morning. So if I had the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it was 30 or something over here in Columbus, that range.
Yeah, it's modest, like 75,
Only
76
modest.
degrees here. So not too terrible. No
Modest,
complaints.
yeah.
Ugh.
Mhm.
So we also talked about basically how Alex and Cam both got into ultra running and kind of what led them down those paths. And apparently you were pivotal in Alex's ultra running beginnings, as you're doing the crazy Harton around Strouds.
Yeah, that was something.
I'm running with you.
It's a good
Yeah, that
loop,
was
though.
wild. I was basically, he's like, yeah, I'll come pace you for a loop or two. And I was like, yeah, just meet me at this random trail intersection at a certain time. And I was just glad I was able to get there in time to meet Alex to do a loop or two with him. But it was awesome.
Nice. So we were talking about books too for a little bit. I kind of want to go back on that topic a little bit. That one seemed to be pretty interesting, since I know Cam, you seem to be a prominent reader as well. Talking about that Killian Jornet book, right?
It was Scott Johnson, Steve House, and Killian Jornet wrote that book all together. I think so. It's like out on the shelf in this other room right here. I should have brought it in. But yeah, it's called Training for the Uphill Athlete. So
Yeah, I
definitely recommend.
haven't read that one yet. I've read all like Dean's books. I read Scott Jurek's book, and I did the Rick Roll book, the Finding Ultra or whatever that one was called. That one was like about his vegan diet switch and into the ultras. But and then Dean's got one out recent, right? I believe. I don't know. It was the Road to
Dean-
Sparta. Well, it was still probably like a year ago, probably, but
Yeah. Dean's got like 4 books at this point.
he just keeps writing them. But
I mean, good for him, right? if they sell, like good
Yeah.
for Dean. I say that like I know him.
Makes a living somehow.
Yeah. hmm
What about you, Wesley? You doing any reading down there?
No, I haven't recently done a lot of reading. I've actually gotten into some audiobooks. I've been trying to do listen to an audiobook or two occasionally, but not really running related. But yeah. So Cam, I know that you guys started talking about your goals for this year. I know there's one specific goal that I know really caught my interest when you were talking about it, or when I was talking about you before this chat, and it kind of wanted me to bring it up. So have you guys gone into the goals yet?
Nope.
We have not.
We just kind of finished
Sweet.
up getting into running, and then we were going to touch on some accomplishments next and go to goals, so we can kind of do those
Sick.
together.
Sick.
Mhm.
So I'm up to speed now.
My books.
Yeah.
Okay, though.
We'll
Yeah, so-
circle back. I feel like your recommendations are going to be not running related.
My recommendations?
No, Alex's.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you guys are both pretty young ultra runners, obviously being at the age that you guys are. But
16.
you both have 16
In diapers.
Alex's.
In diapers, according to Tim Crow.
Yeah. We're his grandkids, remember?
Grandkids. He has two very lovely grandkids, and you too.
Yes.
What has been your biggest accomplishment so far in life and in ultra running so far? What's one thing that like you can say that you've been super proud of up to this point that really kind of changed the way you've gone about things, whether it's running related or life related? It's kind of like just made you realize, wow, this is something I can actually do and do it kind of well, and I can actually like survive these races. So what was that moment for you, and how did you determine that?
Alex, you're up first.
that life goal question, that's a big one. Well, I guess I'll start with the running one because it's a little easier. Back in March at the Ohio Backyard Ultra, when I, of course, didn't finish the race, I dropped out after 100 miles, but I completed 100 miles before quitting, which was much further than I had ever run before. And that was my personal goal for that weekend, was to get at least 100 miles. So I'll call that the biggest running accomplishment to date. Life accomplishment, I guess probably just graduating college and finding employment all by the age of 21.
Finding employment. I feel like that's a dig.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I mean, my take on that has got to be, life accomplishment is definitely getting into graduate school. I always feel a little bit like I'm bragging every time I talk about that, but at the same time, I got in, I earned this. So that's definitely the life accomplishment. I'm a first generation college student. If you would have told 17-year-old Cam that, 5 years from now, you're going to run ultra marathons, you're going to live in Chicago, Illinois, and you're going to be studying anthropology at the University of Chicago, I would have thought you were taking all of the drugs at once. So, and then as far as running accomplishments, I don't know. I don't have like a traditional one. And I see Michael's already roasting Alex about his top achievement being a DNF in the chat.
Yeah,
So I don't want to go for that either.
I'll take it.
But I think it's just, continuing to do this. And I mean, it's definitely not all on me, the ultra community from like the very first trail and ultra races that I did made me feel very welcomed. Definitely like I belonged with them. There was like very little gatekeeping, but just sticking with this, like I picked up this really hard thing as a hobby, and I'm not great at it, but I'm sort of committed to it, and I have been committed to it for a long time now. So yeah, that's what we're going to go with running accomplishment, is that I still run ultras. I'm signed up for 3 more at this point. Well, only 2 technically, but I've got like 7 on the list potentially for next year. So we'll see.
What are those first
You guys
two?
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So I got the audio going.
we'll figure out a video later. But nevertheless, Cam, you said you got a bunch of races on the agenda for next year. You mean this year, correct? It's 2020.
Yeah, 2020. Is it 2020? I think it's still 2019 in Chicago.
Yep.
We officially made the turn.
Okay.
Like a week ago. Where you been?
I mean, honestly, on New Year's, I was probably asleep at like 10 p.m. So,
Seagulls and waves. Yeah, I think I got walked over to the TV like 10 seconds before the ball dropped.
yeah.
I was like, cool, go to bed. But Wesley, what was going on in your background over there?
My background.
Yeah. Sounds like there's like a lawnmower.
Yeah.
You know, there's probably some kind of animal behind me or something. There's some kind of wildness going on here. Just got a bunch of family, a bunch of people. It's Hawaii, so apologize for the quality this week, Original Nation, but we're still out here. So you guys talked about your biggest accomplishments kind of up to this point. So obviously, I think this is an exciting year for you guys because I think at this point, like you guys are at the point where you can not only just sign up for races anymore. I think that like when you sign up for a race, you kind of have to kind of put a time goal on it and kind of put a place goal on it. I know that it's a mind shift switch and that you guys are slowly in the transition of making that more often. So talk about like what your goals are for this year and like maybe what races you want to accomplish certain things that going forward. I know there's a couple on the agenda coming up here shortly, so dive into that. Let's start with Cam.
Okay. So 2020 goals. I have one that has nothing to do with a race, a time, or a place, and that's to beat Wesley or Alex in something. I'm 0 for 2 against these guys in races, and I'm not a fan of that. So I really need to do something about that first off.
This was the one that I was most interested in because I thought I like to say personally, I'm driven by competition when it comes to running. There's like the community aspect for me and competition. That's the two things that drive me most in this ultra sport. And for you, that's something that when you wrote that down, I was surprised to see that as an answer. And so talk about why that's important to you to beat two of your best friends at a race.
It's like 80 to 90% banter, to be frank. You know, it's never really going to amount to nothing more than, remember that race where I beat you, or, I'm 0-2 against you guys, but definitely watch yourselves, But, on cold mornings, on mornings where I want to sleep in, where I don't want to run, I can always get on Strava and see whatever you guys are doing.
Not much.
And yeah, that's the problem. We've all kind of been slacking. But, and that can kind of push me a little bit. One of the goals that I didn't write down in like the chat thing, but that I have is to sort of build more of like a team or a community feel around myself with other runners. Because I hear all of the pros talk about, I couldn't get through this workout without my teammates. And of course they're doing like, 12 times 400 on the track, right? But at the same time, being far away from a lot of the people that I know and run with here in Chicago, it's going to help me to think, OBU's coming up. I need to do this like 20 miler because, Alex is going to do a 20 miler or Wesley's going to do a 20 miler. And these guys have been running more than me. They've been running longer than me. I've got to make up for that deficit. And it helps me commit to sort of like the process of training, which my other goal then is a process goal. I would like to run one 100-mile training week this year. No idea where that's going to come from in terms of time or like what part of the year, but I would like to do it at some point. It was a goal sort of towards the end of last year that I didn't end up doing. You get busy with school, writing papers, it's at the end of the day, I'm always going to pick school over running at this point in my life. I've gone too far in that sense. I think to not commit fully to graduate school over most other things in my life. But yeah. And then in response to Michael Owens, what about me, Cam? Michael, you've been running at Shawnee alone since I was like 7 years old. So I feel like that's a pretty far-fetched goal. Maybe when you're like a master.
So for 2020, I guess my first goal's got to be to get healthy. Last couple weeks, I've gotten maybe like 15, 14 miles in, running every other day for at best these days. So I got to get healthy first. Got to fix this knee for good so that I can get back to uh, the saddle of 40, 50, 60-mile weeks, which I'm used to. Hopefully, here by the end of January, I can put my knee behind me and be doing that so that I can come into Backyard Ultra in as good of shape as possible. Uh, last year for that race, I told myself a number. I said I wanted to run 100 miles, and as Michael pointed out, rightfully so, that probably stopped. Me, Isaac, and myself, we both kind of had that goal, and we made it to 100 miles, but the race wasn't over. But we had, kind of checked out emotionally, and we tried going back out, but we didn't have the willpower because we had kind of already checked out and threw the towel in. So this year, I don't want to give myself any number. I intend to show up and run as far, as long uh, as I reasonably can. So I'm not putting any time or mileage goal to this year. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to take my name out of the Mount Mitchell Challenge. I was signed up for that next month, the 36 to 40 mile mountain race in North Carolina, because that just came a little too close on the calendar, and I didn't get back to running as quickly as I had hoped. So my first ever DNS is that race, and then I'm also signed up for the Burning River 100. That's in July up in Northeast Ohio. I've always wanted to, really since eighth grade. I think that was the first year I volunteered at that race, and I remember seeing all the runners at that race and being like, these goddamn freaks. Like, I would volunteer on Saturday morning, and then I'd go about my day, and then I'd like go to bed that night, and I'd wake up on Sunday at like 9 a.m. and be like, oh my God, these people who I saw running 24 hours ago are still running. And I remember middle school me was just blown away by that idea. But shortly after, I kind of realized eventually I would want to be those runners. And I've run the relay at that race, the 50-mile event. I've paced and volunteered other years, and then this year or 2019, I tried going for it all, but had to drop out 75 miles in. So there's definitely like, kind of an emotional pull to get back to that race that I've always, been attracted to go home with, a lot of people who I know, friends and family will be out there with me. So it's a real special race for those reasons. So it'd be really cool to get my first official 100 mile belt buckle finisher's medal at that race. So those are the only two races I have for 2020. I don't think I'm going to put anything else on the calendar. At least not before Burning River, because I really just got to get my knee back to 100% so that I can, think about bigger goals beyond that. So that's all I have to say for now.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting that both of you wanted to put the 100-mile distance as kind of one of the key components to your 2020 goals. But in addition to that, you both are also primed and ready to go for Ohio's Backyard Ultra in some sense. You guys both have that race kind of in the forefront of your year. So how are you going to, I know it feels like this year you guys are preparing for the race differently than you were, say, last year. Maybe this year it's more of a focus on the mental side of things. How do you think that's kind of like shifted? How do you think it'll play out? And how do you think that's going to help you going forward? Do you think, I know personally for me, I went into Ohio's Backyard Ultra last year saying, I'm just going to run as far as I can, not put a number on it, and it didn't pan out as well as it did at, say, Bob's Backyard Ultra when I had a number set. So do you think it's better just to go in with a mindset of, hey, I'm not putting a number on it, or is it better to put in your number at, like, say, 150 miles and then going from there?
Well, I think we'll find out.
Yeah, we've definitely got different approaches. This test doesn't exactly hold scientific muster, but we'll make some conclusions.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time an ultra runner made suspicious conclusions. So,
I mean, I guess I am quantifying my goals a little bit. I plan on, calling off work on Monday, so not saying I plan to be running on Monday, but going to make plans to not be home yet. So we'll see if what that means. Yeah. But I guess it just depends. Like I really think I internalized the race with myself last year. I focused on myself. I wasn't really like looking at how many people were still standing. I was just like checking in with myself and making sure I could get back to the starting line every hour. And then that 100-mile mark hit, the sun rose, and I was like, peace. It's been real. But had I taken the time to process what was happening around me and kind of looked outside of just how I was doing, I might have been motivated. Because, I mean, there were only about 10 people still standing at that point. So, who knows if I had just went out for another hour and just, went to see how far I could have made it. Would have been ugly, but I'm sure I could have moved for at least a few more hours and given it a try. And there's definitely a part of me that regrets that. So I think like I owe it to myself this year to approach it without putting like a mileage goal on, just saying I'm going to go for it and just see where it lands. Obviously, there's some really impressive resumes on the entrance list, but I welcome that because that just means it's a better chance that it goes further and it's more of a party. So I'm not even like intimidated or anything. I just think it's cool that, people who have proven to run really, really long distances are going to be there. So I'm just looking forward to showing up. Hard to say, again, being injured right now, I'm obviously not going to be quite as in shape. It'd be nice to have a good winter training block under the belt, but that's not going to be the case, obviously. So that definitely hurts my confidence a little bit, but there's a lot of muscle memory that comes from having run for all the years I have. So I think once I get back in the groove a little bit with training, I can get back to where I was hopefully pretty quickly. And then it's a mental game. So I think it might help a little bit if I don't give myself a number and just say, go out there until you drop. Keep it simple. Probably a little bit less stressful for me because if I were to pick a number, it'd be 150 miles or 170 miles or 120 miles, and all of those sound absurd. So I think it's an easier approach just to go out there and plan on having fun for a little while.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of, I think, going about it. And I think that, like, the backyard format, obviously, everyone kind of knows that everyone's kind of in the same boat. Everyone has to stop for X amount of time every loop, no matter what. They can't start the next loop for the next hour. So even if, like, Jim Walmsley came up to this backyard event, like, he's not gonna outsmoke you. It's hard to get intimidated because, like, you're never gonna be too far away from, like, the Harvey Lewises of the world and the Tim Crows of the world and whatnot. So,
I'm not worried about Tim Crow.
Yeah.
One of those old guys does not scare me.
One of those days is not like the other. But it's just different because you're kind of all together at the same time. So I kind of like how Alex said it's easy to not get intimidated going forward. Going off the next race, Burning River for Alex, how important is that race going to be to finish? I know John's also running it as his first 100-mile attempt. How big will that race be for you?
I think it's one of those things that I just want to like check off the list. Like, obviously it's not, a highly competitive, race by certain measures. It's obviously not Western States, like anything up in those top tier races. But it's always been a fun race to be a part of, and it fits well on the calendar. So, it makes sense for logistical reasons for me too this year. And I think it'll just be really cool because I know my family will be able to be out there, on the course and at the finish line at whatever odd hour that's at. So I value that a lot. Just being able to have, family and friends out there, as opposed to going somewhere to another state far away where I probably won't have many people who I know there. So I think it'll be cool if I can get that finish, which I plan to this year. Even if I have to walk it in, I think I just want to get it done, and then I can at that point focus on branching out a little bit and finding some other uh, races maybe in other states or with more elevation or what have you. So it'll feel good, kind of just be like a weight off my shoulders a little bit to get that buckle there.
Tim wants to know if you need a pacer.
I'll
Tim,
be
I
happy
got
to have
dibs
you.
on that job.
Does that mean you're not running it, or
I'm not running Burning. No, I'm not going to run.
no?
Burning
Tim, I'm
River
talking to
100.
Tim. Maybe I
Oh,
can just text him in the comments.
yeah.
Not through this whole tech thing.
Tim, I did not get to pace Alex at last year's Burning River 100.
Yeah,
So I feel as though I'm owed one.
yeah.
I know I'll see you at the start, Alex, for maybe a few minutes. That'll probably be the last time I see you.
You never know, man. It gets weird out there.
It can, but you're definitely a faster runner than me. So,
Well, it's an out and back course, right?
I will. Oh, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
cross
you'll
paths
see
one
him
more time.
at least twice.
At least twice.
Hopefully, I got a
Yeah.
whoop whoop from Tim Crow while he
Yeah.
was blowing up. I guess I can't make fun of him too much because I dropped out, but he did not look good when I saw him. So,
Yeah. I mean, Tim Crow and blowing up, he assured me Wesley was going to blow up at the Shawnee 50 at an aid station. And then at the next aid station, Tom Jackson for Senate, District 24, right?
so
Yeah, little plug there. He told me that Wesley was like an hour and a half up on me. And I was like, wait a minute. So
Yeah, Wesley wasn't like first place for a while, wasn't he?
yeah, he led the race
For quite a while,
Yeah.
and then he like bonked or something.
Uh,
At least no
I
one
don't
went.
The Shawnee 50.
Yeah,
I was in first place just because there was no one else that wanted to be in first place that day until mile 23. So it was basically like just a casual pace, and eventually the winner of the race caught up to me and just dominated all. He ran the first 22 miles the last 36 miles he ran the race, like just the same pace the whole way, and it was kind of impressive to see him stay consistent all day. So
should eat more candy.
I had like 45 of those oatmeal cream pies, and that's all I needed. So
that's
why is that the new
45
trend?
oatmeal cream pies for 54 miles.
yeah, ask Michael.
I'm not a big math guy, but that's almost 1 per mile.
Yeah, I know what grade I got in math for social scientists here, but
Cam is a scientist.
I guess some people use that word pretty loosely when it comes to social scientists.
Yeah.
So you guys are both, I don't know how to say this, very conscious about your recovery and your cross training and everything else kind of in that sphere of running that like maybe not a lot of people at the age of sub 23 years old would really think about. I know myself, I'm not really in that boat a lot of the times. And I kind of get that Superman mentality where you can kind of do whatever you want because you can recover quick, you're young, and you just think nothing will happen to you. How has your life events and your like training throughout your life kind of changed that mentality for you? Why is it the fact that you guys put in the amount of work that you do in the cross training and the stuff outside of just the regular running? Why is that so important to you guys? And let's start with Alex.
Well, because I have no other option these days. I'm pretty reactionary as a runner. I just didn't do it a whole lot until my knee was giving me issues going back to October of 2019. So I had never really been injured before, but back in high school, I remember I wasn't actually diagnosed, never went to a doctor, but I was feeling like I had plantar fasciitis. And after a couple of weeks of like different stretching and rolling, nothing was really helping at all. And then I read about this little slant board. I actually have it over here. um, that you just kind of stand on, pretty simple gadget, and just kind of strengthen the lower extremities. So I started using that every day as a freshman in high school, and it worked. Like within a week, I was feeling good. So I was like, okay, this thing helps. So I just got in a habit of doing that every day, and I've done it every day since. And then I hadn't been injured since then until uh, October. So that's when I realized I had to like figure something out that kind of got me out of that hole. Uh, so I started doing the rehab exercises that my doctor gave me, and then I realized that you or yoga was really helping me. Some of those deep stretches and stabilizing positions was kind of unmatched, and helping getting some release and relief to that knee. Um, and Yeah, I've just been doing that on YouTube. Watching yoga classes and doing it in my bedroom as much as I reasonably can. So that's been the best thing for me, and feel better each day I do it. So I plan on continuing that as long as I'm having issues to get me out of this injury hole. So honestly, I never really did a whole lot, but the two times I've had an injury, it's caused me to shake up my routine and kind of make sure I'm doing everything I can to stay as healthy as possible. So I would just say I just kind of react to whatever I'm feeling.
But you can.
Yeah. So I've got a very opposite experience to that. So I first started thinking about recovery and that kind of stuff as a football player in high school. I remember we did ice baths always, like during two-a-days. When things were acting up, you went and you saw the trainer. Um, but then my senior year, I also had a knee injury, slightly different from what Alex has going on. Uh, Torn ligaments, fractured my patella, had to get a reconstructive surgery at the age of 17, and then had about 6 months of physical therapy multiple times a week after that. Because, I mean, I remember being 17 years old and being put in a wheelchair from like the MRI machine back to like the doctor's office, and the doctor asking me, "Oh, do you want to be like active as an adult? We don't have to do the surgery. You can walk around like a normal person without having this done. We can get you recovered to that point." So I had to make a choice on whether or not I wanted to like continue doing things I liked, like hiking, you know, and I did. And, it sort of all evolved out of that. I spent the next 6 months, trying to like regrow my right leg essentially. Um, if you've never known someone who's had like an ACL reconstruction, one of the funny things is that your quadricep like literally deflates. It's almost like there's nothing there anymore, just like a bunch of loose skin on the top of your leg. Um, so after that, I became a little more mindful of it, especially in regards to running, because when I first started to running, I had all kinds of aches and pains that were new to me, and they were so different from the kinds of things that you would get playing a contact sport. You know, if you have some like plantar fasciitis pain, maybe it hurts in the morning and at the night, or maybe it hurts a little bit all day long. If you have like some sort of football injury, like the most common things, we always had like a bunch of bruises and stuff from like getting hit. And that's so different versus something that you can kind of like run on, but you kind of can't, and it affects like the rest of your life, you know? So I've always tried to commit like between 10 minutes and like a half hour every day to doing some like really light exercises and then stretching and foam rolling. Because at the end of the day, it's really not that much time. I probably waste that much time every day on Instagram, even though I also do this, you know? So yeah, that's sort of like my tip for that is like make it sustainable, and just do a little bit every day instead of thinking that you need to do, the 1 hour of foam rolling every Sunday, or, 1 hour with whatever new recovery product somebody's trying to sell you on social media now. You you can get a foam roller for probably like $10, and they're gonna work just as well most of the time. So
Wesley. So I kind of want to go more into detail with your guys' injuries. Specifically, maybe we can start with maybe Alex's, since yours is the most recent, and go more in depth about what happened and what exactly you've been doing to build back the strength, and kind of what you've been also doing in terms of a mental aspect. Because if you're not running as much, and that's kind of for most people ends up being like their meditative thing, you've kind of had to do something else probably to help keep you moving. So I kind of want to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I think it was just a culmination of it was my first really like full year of running big races, and I was having a lot of fun with it, and I kept signing up for that next race throughout 2019, um, and I was feeling good training in coming into Shawnee. Um, things for the most part were going well, and I had a good race at Shawnee. I mean, I finished it strong. I was eighth place. Um, had no aches or pains during. Finished with a smile. Um, and I took a few days off after, as like I normally would after a race of that volume. Um, it was that Friday after, so about 5 full days off. Um, I go for a run, and my knee was aching a little bit, so I kind of shrugged it off. I was like, okay, that's probably normal. Try a couple days later, and it was the same. So I like took another week off. I was like, okay, just let's reset here, and then knee was only got worse when I tried again a week later. So that was getting a little frustrated at that point. About 2 weeks after, I could tell that this ache was still there, and for a few weeks it was kind of that cycle. I'd take a week off, then I'd try again, and my knee would be pretty achy, and within about 3 miles of running I could tell it was not smart to continue any further. Um, so that was kind of what it was like for about a month. I didn't want to admit to myself it was anything more than like an ache that I could handle, by rolling and stretching and doing all the tricks I know, that I've heard about over the years at home, which I had been trying, and icing and everything, to no avail. So after 5 weeks, I finally saw the physical therapist, and it was back up. I was home one weekend up in Solon. Um, so I saw someone up there, and he kind of shrugged. I mean, he worked out my knee, and he didn't think it was too serious. He thought it was patellar tendonitis. Um, and he thought, maybe another session and that would be good. So then I was back in Columbus, and I went to the doctor who he referred me to here, and she was a little bit more concerned when she first felt it than for what I heard from him. Um, because I still wasn't running, and it was getting close to 2 months by the time I saw this next doctor. So I went to, I think, 4 total sessions with her over about a month and a half with her. That was through the end of December, and wasn't making much progress. And then I ended up getting an MRI because I was still having pain, uh, even after a few sessions, and she was getting kind of worried. So the doctor ordered me an MRI, and I had to pull up the results because I had never heard of the muscle. But the result was that a sprain at the junction of my polydius muscle, which is a lateral hamstring attachment. I Googled that after, and it's this relatively small muscle that kind of runs around the inside to the back of the knee. So I guess that's been sprained, which there was no tear. So I suppose that's a good thing, because she was worried that I was going to have a meniscus tear, or some other kind of damage of that nature. So uh, my understanding is that it's not as bad as it could have been. And the doctor said that a few more weeks of keeping up the rehab exercises I've been doing at home, and doing easy runs, I should be good soon. So hopefully I don't have to go back in for any more physical therapy. Um, so I'm gonna keep up on the at home exercises, and keeping the running relatively easy for a little bit. And then, yeah, so it was tough. It was definitely my first time being injured for this long. I mean, it's been almost or over 3 months since the injury first set in. Um, and it took me, again, like I said, it took me like the first month to even admit to myself that I was hurt, because I'm used to dealing with aches and just kind of taking care of it on the fly. But this ended up being different, and I didn't want to admit that for a while. And then finally I did that, and that's when I, had to address that I was not currently running. I had to commit to doing other activities. So I've been doing a lot of strength training in the gym at my apartment, a lot of push-ups. So I think I'm a little stronger than ever. So there's a blessing in disguise there, from spending time in the gym, kind of working out on other things. I've been able to walk a good amount on the treadmill, just to keep the legs moving. So nothing too exciting, but kind of force myself to spend at least a few minutes in the gym, doing whatever I can just to stay strong and move a little bit. And I think the lesson I learned was that, you know, you have to be very conscious of your relationship with running. I really came to like running, and like the void, I guess you could say, it filled. The commitment it was. I really enjoyed having that commitment in my life. And then at any moment it can get taken away. So I don't mean to be dramatic, because my injury is not that serious, but to anyone at any time, running can just be taken away, and you have to be prepared to not have that outlet in your life at any moment. So it kind of taught me just to be careful with what your relationship is with running, because it is fragile. Running is dangerous, and something out of your control. Anything can happen that could sideline you for a period of time, a long time, whatever it might be. Um, I think it's just healthy to make sure you're in check with what your relationship is to the sport, and you know, just kind of keeping things realistic and understanding that the risk you're putting yourself through. So again, injury could have been much more serious and prolonged. So I don't have much to complain about. Again, in about 15 years of running, this was the first like extended period of time I had to take off. So I have a lot to be fortunate for in my years of running to this point. So I don't mean to complain much, but it definitely was a good personal lesson about, um, you know, the relationship you have with the sport and running.
The the pain that you had with the knee injury, was that like was that something that you were like a stereotypical, like a low scale level pain, and it just kind of was there all the time, or was it something that was like a bit more uh, excruciating, or come in and out, that you were like, all right, this is something new or different? Like, what made you realize that that was a different type of injury?
Yeah, the pain itself was never like excruciating. I was never limping, or never affected my range of motion. Um, it was mainly because I don't think I ever let it get to that point. Because I'd go for a run, I'd make it maybe 2 miles, and by that third or fourth mile, it'd be aching pretty good. It wasn't too sharp, um, or anything like overly concerning, but it was enough to like slow me down. And I would stop, and my knee would kind of be aching as I walked around or sat for a couple of days following those early runs. And then uh, again, like 4 days later, I would try again, or a week later, I'd try again, and the pain would just be right back again as soon as I would start on those second runs even after a few days off. So I knew when I was taking the time off and then trying again, and the pain was still there, and then it would hurt for a few days after again. I could just tell it wasn't getting any better. Um, there were certain stretches, where different like quad stretches. I couldn't do lunges. Some of those uh, motions where you kind of like bend your knee pretty good, that I used to be able to do no problem. I couldn't get into those positions and do those movements or stretches. So that was kind of a red flag, when I wasn't able to do those without some serious pain. Uh, so like I said, the first month, because it was relatively minor pain, I wasn't admitting or wanting to realize it was an injury, but it really was persistent. And then I started to notice that every time I would bend my knee, it would be clicking. There'd kind of be like a popping sensation on the outside. So I became cognizant of that, and that made it pretty clear that something wasn't working. It was more than just a sore knee. It was something was out of line, and the doctors confirmed that that is an issue. So there were a few warning signs that started to add up, and the doctors confirmed some of that.
Yeah, I always find it interesting because I feel like the harder part would be to realize something that's not excruciating, because a lot of times, there's that mentality of like, suck it up, push through it. If it's like a low level pain, just kind of work through it. But then at the same time, had you kept doing that, you might have done significantly more damage.
Yeah, yeah, I think about that a little bit. Like in those early runs, maybe if I had just pushed through and went for like a 10-mile run just to see if it would loosen up, um, maybe somehow that would have been good. But I think it became pretty clear if I'd go for a 3-mile run, I would be in pain for 3 days, even though it was like minor pain. The fact that it was there, I could just tell it wasn't right. Now I've dealt with aches before. I've run, I've had knee soreness and aches before when I was training a lot, and I've been able to kind of knock that down pretty quickly, and keep running. But I realized when I was doing some of those stretches and strength exercises that I had known, and it wasn't making a difference on my own. Um, Eventually, I realized that something wasn't right.
Yeah, that's really well said, Alex. And Regeneration, if you guys have a question to drop in the chat for one of these guys, just make sure to throw that in the chat below, and we'll try to get that question answered for you guys. Kind of going off the injury topic a little bit, a lot of people make assumptions when it comes to ultra running. People just assume like, oh, running's bad for your knees, and a bunch of other assumptions that maybe people that don't participate in the sport really understand fully. So my question is, what is something you wish you could make people understand about running ultras? And what do you think that people assume about ultra running that just isn't true? So let's start off with Cam here.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of my interactions with people are not with other ultra runners. Believe it or not, we're actually a small population of people. You can sort of lose that, when all you follow on Instagram are other ultra runners. The majority of the people that you talk to throughout the day are, and then you end up in like a different group of people, and for example, like I casually mentioned to somebody here at school when we met up to study, I was like, oh yeah, it's so cold. I had to run inside on the treadmill this morning. And she kind of like rolled her eyes and she was like, oh, wow, that must have been like so difficult for you, you know?
Who's the
But
she?
this is just a woman in some of my classes. Um, but I think there's like this assumption that if you run ultras, you're some like super fit, super hardcore athlete, you know, and we're just not. Like as a population, it's pretty much everyday regular people who run these races. If everyone who ran these races were ultra fit, super hardcore people, there'd be like 4 or 5 people at every race. Um, and the thing that I wish that like I could make people understand is that like running isn't really about like exercise or pain or losing weight. Running for me is primarily like a practice of joy. Like um, and that's not to say that there's times where I don't like feel like I'm grinding, or there's times where I don't want to run when I wake up in the morning. But you want to be able to like put someone in your shoes, and you're just like hitting the top of the climb at Shawnee or Mohican, and the sun's kind of just coming up and poking out of the trees, and be like, do you feel this thing that I feel? Because in that moment, there is so much possibility and so much joy that, I don't know anyone who would ever feel that would then not run ultras, you know? And I'm sure other people get it from other places, and that's great. But, this is where I get it. And I'm not some masochist who, is out to hurt myself.
Definitely. Alex, go for it.
Yeah. Maybe this is a hot take, but like usually what I tell people when they hear how far I run is that like running like a fast marathon or a fast 5K and the training that goes into that, I think, is harder, more impressive, takes more discipline, all the above, to accomplish, some of those impressive racing times,
Spicy.
compared
Spicy.
compared to finishing 100 miles. Of course, you can go into detail, if you want to talk, Jim Walmsley's Western States times, like that's obviously a different level. But what I'm doing in my ultra running is much less impressive than what a lot of more common people are doing in shorter distance races. Who it's probably more of a mainstream thing. So, which I don't think people comprehend how that's possible. But when you're running like 14-minute pace for 100 miles, it just doesn't take the same output as it does to run 6-minute miles for 26. Um, so I think ultra running, at least the way I approach it for now, I don't want to speak for anyone else. Um, it doesn't take nearly as much discipline as it does, because I'm not going to the track once, twice a week and running this detailed, dialed in workout where I'm hitting exact splits to the second, running around the track. Like, I'm just not doing that. I'm going out by feel most days, maybe some rough mileage targets. I'm really looking at pace. I'm really just moving by feel and having fun, and building confidence by running for a few hours at least, uh, once or twice a week. So the way I view it is, I don't think it's as crazy. I think it's just one outlet that we have, and I think a lot of people have something similar that just isn't ultra running. Um, it's a social thing. It's just a way to have fun, which I can totally understand how someone might call that crazy, but I guess just like, kind of like how Cam said, we're not really that strong or that fit. We're just stupid. Usually what I say. It takes a lot more stupidity than any amount of fitness or talent to do a lot of what we do in ultra running. So that's kind of the misconception out there, is that like I'm not like some superhuman by any means. I'm just stupid enough to try some things. So I guess I'd want people to just understand that it's not so much some crazy talents or discipline, just slightly weird, pretty stupid hobby that we have. And I like to reassure people that it is fun, that I have good friends who I do it with. And that's kind of the big part for me. And I think that makes it a little bit more relatable, I would hope. So.
Definitely.
And another thing I'd like to add, my first cross country coach in high school, Wayne Vereb, he would always like to say how there's a lot worse things you could be doing with your life than running for however many hours or miles you're out there for, which really resonated, because there's certainly people who are making questionable life decisions, on the weekends or whenever, and it feels good to know that I'm not doing certain things to myself that others might, whether it's drinking excessively or what have you. I'm a little bit reassured that my extreme habit is at least like a good exercise, and I'm taking care of myself while doing it. So I get some reassurance from that mantra.
Yeah, really well said. Before we wrap up, I'm going to hit you guys with a couple rapid fire questions. So basically, answer these in as little as words possible. Say like less than 10 words. So I'm just going to start off here. What is something that nobody knows about you in Regeneration? That could be like a random hobby or something else that you do for fun outside of running. Go for it, Cam.
So I like cooking and baking. Baking, not like weed or weed brownies, as someone's probably assuming right now, but like bread. So
Nice.
Awesome, Alex.
I have web toes.
We went from bread to web toes right there.
that's,
I just want to point that out.
yeah.
That's a good transition.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
General life advice or about racing ultras? Oh boy, general life advice.
Both, either, whatever you
Okay.
want.
Um, I think I guess the best advice for everything is just like be patient. You know, um, better phrase probably for ultras like if it hurts, keep going. It's going to get better, and if it feels like it's going really well, stay patient. It's going to get worse.
It's true.
Best I've heard, show up. Uh, pretty simply. You don't necessarily have to be the smartest person, or if you're talking about like school or work or whatever, but you got to be in the room, you got to be present, and if you keep showing up to the right places, people are going to recognize that. Of course, I can see how that applies to running too. Show up to that training run, show up to the starting line. You might not be sure you can do certain things or you can hang with certain runners, but if you show up, that's the only way you're ever going to find out. So simply put, show up.
Sounds like you're living that to the fullest at Ohio's Backyard Ultra in a couple months here. What is one TV show that you both recommend?
Uh-oh.
That
You
we
guys have
both
to
recommend.
yes, together.
I feel like the obvious
Always Sunny in
answer is
Philadelphia?
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yeah. Um, just something that's the egg in these trying times.
Yes.
So.
We definitely weren't making It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia references at like mile 5 of Shawnee 2019.
Mm-hmm. No, there was a large group of men in that like sort of second pack that were totally in on all of those jokes that we made.
In the woods, in the dark, grown men talking about eggs.
Yeah.
Worst things in life.
And lastly, one last question here. What is one bucket list race that you guys want to accomplish in your lifetime? What's the one goal, whether it's Western States, Hard Rock, Hurt 100, or another race? Go for it, Alex.
That's a good question. Haven't thought about that too much because there's so much out there. I feel like there's like probably some race out there that I've never heard of, but that like if I read about it, I'd be like, oh wow, that's so cool. So I feel like I'm going to say something and then I'm going to realize something else. But for now, it's probably Hard Rock, just because of how hard it is to get into. That kind of like adds an appeal to it. I kind of like the style of it. Doesn't favor the fast, talented runners. It's a grind. There's a reason they give you 40 hours to finish that thing. So there's definitely an appeal to that race.
Well, Cam?
Yeah. In keeping with me having pretty ridiculous life goals, you heard it here first. I'm going to win Hard Rock. I mean, committing to getting your PhD as a first generation college student is a big goal. So count on it. After I get this PhD, I'm going to win the Hard Rock 100.
I look forward to it.
You've told me that a couple times in private, and I've always just not really laughed, but like it's just such a crazy goal to kind of put out there. It's inspiring to say the least.
It's a real big goal when you've only ever ran like 50 miles. So
not at altitude either.
It's going to take like 8 years. I got time.
Wesley, what's yours?
My bucket list race.
Yeah.
I think Cascade Crest from 100 is on my list for sure. There's a couple Coast, Oregon.
That's your bucket list race?
Yes,
of all the races in the world, Cascade Crest.
Yeah, I just want to do a race in Oregon and Seattle in that region. The Terramara or whatever, that 10 away 100-mile races. That's another new race out in that area. Looks like a really good race. I just want to race in that region. I've done a couple 50-milers, but I think a 100-miler out there would just be incredible. So, I mean, obviously, like Hard Rock would be really cool, and I'm honestly not that interested in Western for whatever reason. I think it'd be cool, but I think there's like 17 other races I'd rather run before Western. So
I think my only pull to Western is because I've read Dean's book, and that was one of the main reasons I started running ultras to begin with. So just for that part of it, but other than that, like I would want to do UTMB.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Just because I want to run like multiple countries like that over there. I think that would be. Plus, all the pictures from that place are just wicked gorgeous. So.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight for our third edition of Ridge Hunter Live. We got Cam Rentsch and Alex Jackson here. Who participated with us all night. Where can they find you guys on social media? I know that the single ladies out there, all of them watching, Both of these guys are single. If you guys are looking for someone to talk to, where can they find you on social media, guys?
I think all my platforms are at Alex Jackson 716. But don't get too excited. I don't really post too much. But check it out.
Cam?
Yeah, it's also at Cam Rentsch. I get no notifications, so
I don't
be
have
patient, as I said. But
So if you're sliding into their DMs, just give them a couple days to get back to you.
All right. Well, I think that wraps about this episode up. Thanks for Dreader Nation for tuning in and enjoying this episode. We'll have more coming out in the future. We had a Road to 100 drop this morning early, so if you haven't got a chance to go watch that, go check that out. We'll have Run Down tomorrow, and we'll be back at you next week.
Yeah, I'll be back in Ohio, hopefully, maybe.
No, you're not coming
Stay
back.
in Hawaii.
Leslie's not coming back ever.
Stay in Hawaii. Why would you come back?
It's 5 p.m. here, by the way. It's crazy.
Oh, man. Well, it's only 9 p.m. here, so.
It's 10 here.
Yeah.
So,
Time zones.
yeah.
Past Travis bedtime, so
Yeah.
That's true.
wherever I am.
All right. Later, guys.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.